Shabbat Shalom. Thursday evening, a couple of nights ago, at our house in Reseda, with dinner we had a couple of pieces of matzah. Not because supplies were running low and a much-needed trip to the grocery store was in the offing, although that was a little bit true, but because Thursday evening was the beginning of the 14th of Iyar. 14th of Iyar. A day like any other on the Jewish calendar? Actually, no. In the middle of the month of Iyar, or just about, exactly 1 month after Passover, is Pesach Sheni, the second Passover. A second Passover, you say? Who ever heard of such a thing? Well, when the Holy Temple stood in Jerusalem, this day was a second chance for those who were unable to bring the Passover offering on the eve of the first Passover 1 month earlier. And today, the vestige of that observance is to have a little bit of matzah on the night and the day of the 14th of Iyar. From where does this tradition come? Fortunately, I don't have to be like Tevye and say, I'll tell you, I don't know, but it's a tradition. We actually have biblical reference for how this Pesach Sheni came to be. In the 9th chapter of the book of Numbers, which we'll hear in another bunch of weeks, there were some people who had become ritually impure through contact with a dead body. As a result, they could not prepare the Passover offering on the appointed day, the 14th of Nisan. So they approached Moses and Aaron, and they said, "Why should we be deprived and not be able to present God's offering in its time amongst the children of Israel?" And Moses said to them, "Wait here, and I will hear what God will command concerning you." And God spoke to Moses, saying, "Speak to the children of Israel, saying, any person who is contaminated by death or is on a distant road, whether among you now or in future generations, shall prepare a Passover offering to God. They shall prepare it on the afternoon of the 14th day of the second month, and shall eat it with matzah and bitter herbs." That's Numbers chapter 9 from verses 1 through 12. The 6th Lubavitcher Rebbe, Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak Schneerson, who lived from 1880 to 1950, described the eternal significance of the second Pesach. And he said, the meaning is that it is never too late to rectify a past failing. Even if a person has failed to fulfill a certain aspect of his or her mission in life because he or she has been contaminated by death, in other words, in a state of disconnection from the divine source of life, or on a distant road from his people and God, there is always a second Passover in which he or she can make good on what they have missed out. Pesach Sheni, the second Passover, thus comes to represent the power of teshuvah, the power of return. Teshuvah, as we know, is commonly translated as repentance, but it's much more than turning a new leaf and achieving forgiveness for past sins. It is actually a power to go back in time and redefine the past. Teshuvah is achieved when a negative deed or experience is applied in a way that transforms its significance, when something from that experience is learned that is so powerful that it affects our choices in this and future time. When a person's contact with death or disconnection from God evokes in him a striving for life that he would never have mustered without that experience, or when her wanderings on distant roads awaken in her a yearning for a home that she would never have otherwise felt, those negative experiences are literally turned inside out. Contact with death is transformed into a more intense involvement with life, and distance is transformed into a greater closeness. The second Passover, with its premise that nothing is beyond rectification, came because a small group of Jews languishing on a distant road elicited the gift of teshuvah directly from the Almighty. And these two Passovers suggest two ways to achieve a cleansing, a beginning again. The first one in Nisan we know so well. It's slow and arduous. It takes place over many weeks, and we live in that state of cleanliness, of purging for 7 or 8 full days. The second Pesach, one day, quick and decisive. And our sages look at these two Passovers as two elements of the way that a person comes to change in their life. Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi in the 2nd century of the Common Era said, "There are those who acquire their world through many years of toil, and there are those who acquire their world in a single moment." Teshuvah can be a single wrenching of the self, a single flash of regret and resolve. Some acquire that place after many years, said the greatest tzaddik of his day, building it brick by brick with the conventional tools of deliberation and work, and some who come to that moment in a single flash, an instant that molds their future and redefines their past. I think a lot about second chances. Some people in this world seem to have an unlimited number of them, don't they? No matter what they do, no matter what they say, they always seem to bounce back with a second or a 200th chance at that bite of the apple. And others seem to be haunted over and over again by one bad mistake that, like the proverbial bad penny, keeps turning up and never seems to go away. I can't pretend to figure it out. And as my teacher and friend Dr. Tamar Frankiel would say, those kind of questions, Shana, are part of your spiritual practice. They're there for you to mull over, to consider, to apply to your own life, and do the best you can to harness Jewish teachings, to tolerate, accept, and live with the vagaries and inconsistencies of this world. But when it all comes down to it, we belong to a tradition that in its most ideal sense reminds us that yes, it is a truth that people may not forgive, but God does. We belong to a people that believes that God forgives and gives a second chance every single day. There's a beautiful Hasidic teaching. It's strong, shared by Martin Buber in his book, The Way of Man. It's a teaching from the Rabbi of Ger in regard to Yom Kippur, but it applies to Teshuvah every single day. The Gerer Rebbe warned us against not giving ourselves a second chance. He wrote, "He who has done ill and talks about it and thinks about it all the time does not cast the base thing he did out of his thoughts. Whatever he's thinking, there he is. His soul is utterly in what he thinks, and he dwells in baseness. He will not be able to turn and do teshuvah, and his spirit will grow coarse, and in addition to this, he may be overcome by gloom. What would this person do? Rake the muck this way and that way, it will always be muck. Have I sinned? Have I not sinned? What good is it for God? In the time that he is brooding over it, he could be stringing pearls for the delight of heaven. That is why it is written, 'Depart from evil and do good. Turn away from evil, do not dwell upon it, and do good.' If you have done wrong, then counteract it by doing right." This time in which we are living is a time for so many of second chances. Second chances for individuals, for communities, for society, for humanity. Many businesses and public spaces are about to open up after weeks of being shuttered. What kind of second chance are we giving ourselves? Will it be to go back to the way we have always done things, or will we move forward? The message of that second Passover is pause and take quick and decisive action for change. For those who have come this far, may this be a time of critical second chances. We can turn the tide. That's part of our spiritual practice. We need to become more expert at doing right every single day. Maybe because of circumstances in the world, some people actually missed Passover a few weeks ago. The tradition since the book of Numbers has said, Al tidagu, don't worry. Leave that stress behind. There is a second chance. If you're seeing this on Shabbat or afterwards, yes, second Pesach was a few days ago, but it's okay. If you have a little extra matzah lying around, take a few bites of it. Remember that it is the bread of humility. Be grateful for its symbolism in our tradition. Or just imagine the taste of it, knowing that every single day we are walking the path of the Exodus, carrying that flat bread on our backs. May it and we rise again to endless new chances at life, love, holiness, and communion with the divine in all things. Shabbat Shalom.